Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, depending on where you are, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our next session of Fireside Chats that we're doing. This one specifically focused on Kandy Call Center. And we're going to have a few presenters talking about provisioning, best practices, use cases, and more about this cost-effective call center service for traditional inbound call centers. We have Sarah Hughes, we have Lee Higgins, and we also have Casey Crosby, all key members of the Kandy team who are going to walk this through with you today. We also have a few other individuals that will be keeping an eye on the question window, so please feel free to submit your question in that window and we'll try and respond to you as soon as we can. And also we'll send you the webinar replay and a PDF of the slides within 24 to 48 hours after this session. And with that, I'll send things over to Sarah, who will get this webinar started.
Thanks, John. Welcome, everybody. And again, this section is, webinar is on our Kandy Call Center. Wanted to give you a high-level overview of what we're going to accomplish here today, and we're going to talk about what Kandy Call Center is, because we don't want to make the assumption that you know everything about it, how to enable it in Kandy Business Solutions Admin. We're going to talk about call routing methods, use cases. We're going to talk about the options that you have to set up while callers are waiting to be answered. We'll talk about overflow and should you overflow, should you not. We'll talk about provisioning the queues, agents and supervisors, including Kandy Call Center has an auto attendant as part of it. We'll talk about phone agents and soft phone agents, which should you choose, pros and cons there. And we'll also talk about CRM integration, and we'll demonstrate Salesforce integration. We also will talk about the supervisor controls, real-time stats in that, and historical reporting, which is also ad hoc and scheduled. And then finally, we'll cover off best practices throughout this sequence in deploying and migrating from other systems and making changes in the Kandy Call Center. And then customer success tools to help you, as well as some support tips and things as well as what's going on. So let's start off at the beginning here and just high level reset and say that there are multiple things that you can do as far as incoming call flow. And the thing that we're going to particularly zero in on, we talked before about hunt groups, and we've touched on UCD groups before with you, but today we're going to talk about Kandy Call Center. And next month we're going to talk about our live support. So because one size doesn't fit all, that's why we have so many options. But again, today we're going to talk about this. If you look at a decision tree, and again, high level, we're going to provide these slides to you. I also use this in our how to sell call center capabilities, is that if your call center is voice only, a lot of times they talk about contact centers, and that's multiple engagements with your customers or clients. But if it is call center is voice only, these are our three options: hunt groups, UCD groups, which is like ACD, automatic call distribution, and then Kandy Call Center. And all of these have to be agents within KBS, or they have to be users or subscribers here. There are two other things with live support in our resale arrangement with Five9 that are higher in omni-channel. Those two are. So again, we're going to focus on Kandy Call Center here. So what is it? It is, as I mentioned, voice only coming in. The agents can either be SIP telephones, any of the SIP phones that we support, or they can be a console user, a soft client user. They can be in one or multiple skill sets. Some skill sets are also called queues. Sometimes in this they're called services. And then there's multiple ways to get the call to the right agent. That could be broadcast ring all. We'll talk about all these different options and which one might be the best for your type of call center. We'll also go through the auto attendant. As I said, we're going to touch on supervisors and agents, the dashboards, reporting, and as well as the CRM integration. So let's start out, and we'll focus on best practices. Most of the ones that I've helped to migrate or set up this Kandy Call Center are ones that are existing call centers elsewhere or contact centers elsewhere. And so one of the things as best practices that I have found makes a big difference is drawing out the current call flow so that you can understand and you can speak through what's working, what's not, so that you can talk about all the different, as calls come in during these time frames or these days, these holidays, what happens when we're closed, what happens if we overflow, finding out what their current solution is, or if they don't have a current solution, what do they want to do in those scenarios? But the big questions are, do you want to keep it the same way? There's probably better ways to route and treat your customers as a better customer experience. And so thinking on things like, do they have very high abandon rates? Do you even know what abandon means? Abandon is where someone has called into the call center and for any particular reason, they decided not to wait anymore. They gave up. And that could be a lost sale to you. That could be a frustrated customer, or probably both. But what was the reasoning? Was it that they got distracted, they need to go do something else, or were they frustrated in how you treated them in the call flow? And taking a look at historical reports will help you also know, are they making sense to you? Are you moving calls around so much that you really can't tell what's going on in your call center? And how are you treating your customers? So that a good way to do this also is to dial in and just go through that and see what's happening, documenting it. And as you design a call center, there's this balancing act between how many people are we going to need to hire and staff versus how we're going to answer our calls. How efficiently and effectively are we going to do that? So that's really kind of the trade-off there. You have to think about what kind of contact center or call center that it is. Is it technical support? Well, you know that you're going to be on the phone handling each individual caller probably longer than if it was just asking a question to be answered like customer service would. Sales is probably questions there, but maybe, taking credit card information and other things. Billing, definitely. But there may be other things too that your call center or contact center is using. So thinking about that, how long that a particular caller will need to be waiting, as well as how long your agents will be servicing or handling that particular call or engagement. So the questions to ask here are, how long do they typically spend on a call on average? How long are callers willing to wait? How urgent is this? How many agents do you have typically logged in at any given shift or time frame? How many shifts do you even employ? 1, 2, 3, 24/7? How many calls do you get per day? What's your peak busy hour? And what is your target percentage of calls to either have answered or abandoned? This is usually your service level. And a lot of times people want 80% is on average. I want of all my calls to be answered or abandoned, meaning they gave up, within 20 seconds. So you decide what that is. And then do you want to give other things like wrap up time, give them time to finish paperwork and stuff like that? So a lot of those will help you decide the best ways to configure this. And so as we go along, and as an example here, if agents spend about 5 minutes per call with each individual caller, and you staff about 4 agents a shift, and you get about 100 calls in 5 hours, kind of evenly splitting those out, then your average speed of answer is going to be about 32 seconds. So your callers will probably wait, over 30 seconds for answering. But if it takes longer than that, or you staff less, they're going to wait longer. So I found some things on the web. There's lots of things out there for you to look at, but one in particular is an Erlang calculator, and it will go in and you can type in for 5 hours, you can say what that particular number of calls that you get. So if you want it to be a normal distribution, a bell curve kind of thing, or again, just thinking of, I don't get very many at the first, but I get a lot at lunch or after people go home or whatever. Make it yours. You put that in, and then how long your calls typically are when they reach an agent. If you want to do any wrap-up time, and then the service level is how long, again, you want all your calls answered or abandoned within this number of seconds. And with voice over IP, that's the beauty of going with a voice over IP service, is there's no blocking of calls. So you want, in the delay part, as you plug that in, there's paid for tools that you can use as well. But as you plug that in, it'll tell you about how long that each caller will wait to get to an agent, and that you need to staff about 4 agents in your peak hours. So I'm now going to hand it over to Lee Higgins to talk about provisioning in KBS. Lee?
Thank you, Sarah. So folks, I apologize to anyone who is already familiar with this particular service, because what I'm going to run through now is effectively the prereqs for getting this enabled within inside your environment. So KCC itself, it's an add-on service. It is not enabled by default, and it requires the first time you set it up first time it is enabled for one of your customers. It does require some background work just to ensure that the tenancy within inside the queuing application is set up correctly and is linked with the customer's environment inside KBS. So the first thing to make sure is that KCC is a license controlled service. So you have to make sure that within inside your catalog, you do have access to the correct licenses. So if they're not available, contact your sales representative and they will actually put them in your catalog for you so you can proceed with the rest of the steps. Now, another prereq for KCC is that we do need to designate telephone numbers as pilot numbers for the actual services, so for the queues that we are going to route calls to. So that means having numbers within inside the system which are designated as system numbers and which are unallocated, and we'll get back to those in a little second. So the first thing you do, assuming now that your catalog has been correctly updated, is you'll want to basically order licenses for your service. So there are four types of licenses for the KCC service. There is firstly the top one we're showing here, KBS CC001, and that's a license which is a type of directory license, and what it ensures is that if your agents, let's say a typical use case would be, let's say it's an environment whereby agents are taking calls and they may then want to transfer or field those calls for other persons within inside the business. So from within inside KCC, you want to be able to monitor the current availability or presence of persons within inside the business who are not agents. Then this license is turned on for that person to make sure that agents and the queuing application has visibility of their state. The second license now we're showing this here is Kandy Call Center agent only. So that is required for you to be able to receive calls from the queuing application. So if you are a KBS subscriber and you want to have the queued calls distributed to you, you must have this license. The next license then is incremental of that. So it's a call center agent and soft client. So by this, you can still answer calls via any sort of standard SIP phone, but you then also have the benefit of a WebRTC based soft client. And Sarah will get to that and demonstrate that in a while, but that with it brings a number of advantages in terms of user experience. And then the final license we have is a supervisor license. So if you want access to the real-time wallboard, or you want a quick and efficient means of updating or performing day-to-day actions to configure your services and queues, then the supervisor license is a good fit for you. So Sarah, if you'd move on, please. So as we say, we're just showing here, I'm sure everyone's familiar with this portal view. So the first step in sort of kicking off this process is to order the licenses, however many you require, following the guidelines previously followed. Sarah, if you move on to the next, please. So as I mentioned previously, there is a little bit of background work to set things up. So the KBS operations team, they have to basically set up the tenancy, ensure it's correctly linked with the customer's KBS environment, and also run a number of checks to make sure that the workspace is correctly set up and you have access to the relevant features. So in order to do that, a case or a request, so a case is raised into the KBS operations team to basically perform these tasks. As part of that, we will typically need to know how many administrator logins you require for the service. So I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, but in order to manage, set up your queues, configure your queues, you have to have a permission known as the tenant admin. By default, we only provide one account. If you need more than one account, then that is something you would include in your initial request. As part of this initial request, we also need to know if what you're setting up is a lab or demo environment, or if it is an actual real customer. Now, if it is a lab or demo environment, that will require some additional consultation, discussion, and approval with the actual KBS product team. And then the final thing we do that we ask customers to provide is if they would like to have their own logos appearing in the various UIs, then we ask them to provide that logo as part of the request. Now, what we say is the SLA for this particular request is 3 business days. In almost all cases, things are turned around in less than 24 hours. We just allow for the 3 business days in case there is a particularly heavy schedule and we can't put the resources on it immediately. So once the work is complete, so your case is worked and the tasks are complete, your KBS portal then updates with a set of links for you to access and manage your service on KCC. So you'll have a link for the main provisioning UI. So that's the admin logs in there and configures the service. You'll also have a link for the agent console. So if you're an agent who is using the WebRTC console, you will be provided with your own personalized link for accessing that for your particular service. And there's also basically a supervisor license. Now, whether you can access those latter 2 will depend on which licenses you have acquired and which licenses you have assigned to your subscribers. So as part of that as well, you will be once those links are updated, what will let you know that you can check if those are updated is you will actually receive an admin to your provided contact address with the actual username and password for you to your initial username and password for you to log in as the tenant admin. At this stage, you are then ready to start adding the service to your subscribers. Now, KCC is an add-on service, so you take, as Sarah mentioned earlier, you take an existing subscriber and you're adding additional capabilities to that subscriber. So you're now adding the ability to sit in queues and participate in queues and manage calls for queues. Sarah, would you move to the next slide, please? So the licenses I mentioned are add-on. So you have to be an existing subscriber and then you add a license on top of that. Now, there are 2 general rules or 2 preconditions around that. So we can't just add any KCC license to any type of KBS subscriber. So as I say, there are 2 general rules. Firstly, if you want to be an agent, you have to your KBS package that you're adding the license onto has to have a presence capability. And what we're showing here is almost all licenses, apart from Voice Basic, which was previously called Voice Essentials, will have the presence capability. And the reason for that is that the queuing application, if you're an agent, the queuing application will leverage the KBS presence service to basically monitor whether you're active in a call, you're available to have a call distributed to you, etc. And then the second rule is that if you want to use basically the console, or you want to be a supervisor, so that the console application is WebRTC based, you have to have an underlying KBS license that gives you access to a soft client. And the reason for that is KBS soft clients, as we know, are WebRTC based. The KCC client is also WebRTC based, and you can't actually get through the sort of border of KBS, so you can't register a WebRTC soft client unless you have a WebRTC capable license, which we're showing here. So that's the multimedia office and above. Thanks, Sarah. Could you move on to the next? So as we say, this is basically just a graphic of us adding basically the license onto subscribers. Now, if you do infringe any of the previous rules, so if you try to add, a license to an underlying subscriber that doesn't have the relevant capabilities, then that option will be grayed out, and you won't have that choice inside the portal. Sarah, could you move to the next, please? And so what I'll do just after this, a few other notes on sort of best practices. I'll basically run through and give you a quick view of what I was talking about on the portal. So just a few other sort of things worth noting. So We do recommend, so if you are enabling persons for KCC, that it's always typically best to enable it for users who have basically at least the desktop package. That will give you flexibility. It ensures they have presence, and it also gives you flexibility of turning on console capabilities for that particular subscriber if necessary. One other good guideline with basically KCC is that there are potential sort of race conditions that can happen. So what we always recommend to persons is when you are basically designing your queue, you make sure that what we call is the recall timer inside the KCC queues is longer than your is shorter than your voicemail rollover timer. So the last thing you want is a call ringing at an agent, they don't answer it, and it goes to their personal voicemail. So it's not always possible to have agents, or sorry, have subscribers agents who don't have voicemail. So in that case, we advise being careful with the timers. Then in terms of settings that you'd have to configure for your persons who are going to be enabled as agents on the end user portal. So we typically recommend, we always recommend that you basically ensure that the on the phone presence and the report when active setting is turned on. So again, that will ensure that the queuing application has better visibility of what that particular agent is doing and knows when and when not to distribute calls to that particular endpoint. And we also recommend, so based on experience, we also recommend that where viable, network call waiting is also disabled, and that will ensure a cleaner UX for the agents. Sarah, would you mind giving control to me, and I will just run through
just a second
of those screens?
Just a second. We're going to go through a couple more, and then we'll set that up for sure. Okay, so there are multiple ways to route calls, and Lee is going to show us how to go build that. But let's talk through a few basic things that you need to know before we get to that point. There are broadcasts. That basically means that it's going to ring all the agents that you define as agents for this particular queue. And we call it a queue, but it could be a service, whatever it is. It'll ring every one of your agents who's assigned to that queue. The round robin will do it in a circular pattern. Idle will look at those that have not had a queue call in a while, because that's based upon being idle, most idle for that queue. And then skill-based means that you have some agents that have a higher skill, which would be 1, and then some agents that have a lower skill, which would be like 100. You can use a less amount than that if you need to, but that gives you that range to do. And then the top down means you have a list, and you have an ordered list. You have some people in the list that are more skilled at the top of the list, and then other people at the bottom of the list are more kind of backup, cross-trained people. And then looking at these holistically, well, what about different agent skill levels? What should I choose based upon the types of skill levels that I have my agents? Well, the first 3 are pretty much everybody in that are equally able to handle any call that comes in from a skill level. Skill-based, what I just said, that there's some agents that have higher skills than others that have more skills. And then the top down, again, those that are in the top of the list have more skills than those that are at the bottom of the list. Now, if you also look at this across the board based upon the incoming call request, how important is it? Is this super, super emergency, like 911 kind of stuff to get these calls answered? Then let's look at that. So it could be that broadcast might be the better way, because you're going to ring every single agent, and you're not going to try this one, and if they don't answer, then try this one. If they don't answer, then try this one. You're just going to ring them all. So that would be more urgent requests. Those in round robin would be an equal distribution across everybody. Again, idle, looking for the agent with the most idle from the queue, and then skill-based, you're matching based upon their skill, and then the top-down similarly. So if it is really, really urgent, then broadcast might be a better way to get to the right agent there. When you incentivize agents differently, and incentivize meaning pay them Maybe you give them kudos or other types of things, or become employee of the month or whatever. If you're incentivizing them the exact same way, then the first three are probably the best bet. But if you have varying incentives, then skill-based, because you're trying to get them to be more skilled and grow them into that position maybe, or top-down, that might be a better way for you too. If your agents are in just one queue, broadcast might be a good one for you. Round robin, one or more. Idle, probably multiple, because haven't taken one in this queue in a while, so I'm going to evenly distribute it if I'm in multiples. But skill-based, that's where you really want to look at all your agents and what skill level they have. And by that, I mean, if I have two calls come in, one agent, this agent is both a skill level 3 in both the queues, and they come in simultaneously. Do you want one answered over another one? Then you make them a higher skill than the one that's less priority. So thinking of terms in that too. And then the top down there for agents can be in one or more, it doesn't matter. All right, so let's look at a couple other things here. The incoming call experience. So we can do several things for incoming callers. We can route them through an auto attendant or an IVR. We can check holidays. We can check time of day, all of that. It's really good in case all your queues are basically observing the same holidays and the same business hours. But when they don't, even though you send them through that, you're going to have to handle those at the queue level. While people are waiting, and of course you can ring DID or DDI, a direct number to it. You can do a toll-free. You can assign an extension, and that would be an internal number to transfer to that too. You can do a short dial for that, and it would use that number. And then while people are waiting, they can hear music. You can have a welcome message that's played so that they know they've reached the right place. If they come through an auto attendant, you don't care whether or not they chose for sales, so they know they're going to sales queue. But if they have a DID or a direct toll-free number or something to that, at least you know they've reached the place, the destination they intended to, and they didn't misdial something. So you would want to play a welcome message. The short wait is what you typically think of. All of our agents are currently assisting other callers at this time. Please hold until an agent is available to assist you. The welcome message may also be one that you put all of our, that your call may be recorded for quality and training purposes. And you make them hear that at the very beginning. The long wait could be one that you put a breakout message in to say, I thank you for your patience. Please continue to hold. If you'd like to leave a message and have your call returned, you can press a digit now, maybe 9, or you can continue to hold. So you've given them the option to get out. It's in their control, not you forcing them somewhere. And you can also play a message before you decide to overflow, that your call is being escalated or due to heavy call volume, or we've all heard those type of announcements. You can also set up an announcement to be played to a caller if all of your agents are logged out. I don't recommend that. I recommend keep waiting, and you have supervisors monitoring that, because if you dump everything to the receptionist, he or she's not going to know what's going on. And so they're going to keep pushing calls back to the queues, and it's just going to keep coming back to them. You can overflow based upon max number of calls in queue. So if it gets over a certain number, the next one will overflow to this destination. You can also overflow based upon how long people have waited in there. You don't have to. Those are optional. You can also overflow, again, if I don't have any agents logged in or all agents are logged out. And you can set it to transfer to a number or, hang up. There's lots of different options there. Other things that we can do that are pretty neat is we can tell people their position in queue. You can't say what your estimated wait time is, but you can say in your short wait and long wait messages, you can say at the end of that message, and your position in queue is, and then the system will say 3 or 5 or whatever that is. And so that's a great idea. I mentioned the breakout option. I really like giving that control to an end customer as they're calling in. If they choose to wait because they need to get this handled, great. But if they want to leave a message in that breakout and the long wait message, you can say you can press 9 to leave a message, or something like that, and your call will be returned, kind of thing. The agents can go ready, not ready, and there's also a feature that is called post-call work, and that's where you can give the agents a breather to finish post-call processing paperwork, take a drink, just chill for a minute, 30 seconds, whatever it is, and then they'll be put back in to be available to take calls. Now, there is something with that currently, and so we're waiting on the next upgrade to resolve some issues there. So I would highly recommend don't turn that on just yet, but we're waiting on that. You can also provide kind of a whisper prompt to your agents as they maybe are in multiple queues, and take that and tell the agent that you have an incoming call from sales. And so they would know to answer it as sales. Sure, they can see it on their display, but if they weren't paying attention, they would know this is a sales call. There are other best practices here. I've kind of gone through some of these, but the welcome message here within this, you can select that. And again, I like doing that if you're ever going to have calls call in directly to the queue or get transferred to the queue, not just through the auto attendant. The welcome message is a great way to also tell them that they're going to be recorded. I do like the position in queue, but realize that if you do that, you do need to make sure that your short wait and long wait do have that announcement at the end of it, and you kind of leave it hanging, and your position in queue is, and then the system will say the number. The breakout option, I really like that too. Best practices here, don't put it as 0. Everybody knows press 0 and people start punching stuff. So tell them in the long wait message that it's a different number. Maybe it's 9, maybe it's 8, maybe it's something. And use that possibly to transfer to a voicemail only user. That could also be, well, first of all, it's their choice, not that they get pushed to voicemail. That's very frustrating for a caller. And then just making that decision of how much time are you going to, how often are you going to play these messages, are in these two fields. The short prompt after X, that's after 30 seconds is what I have defined here. And then the long wait every 60 seconds, 90 seconds. It all depends upon how long that you think people will be waiting to hear that. And if you map this out, you definitely, if you're going to overflow right after a certain amount of time, think about how long, what prompts they've just heard, and making sure that you think through. You don't want to have the prompt and then you route them over to something. You want to give them some time between there. Here's some fields in this, and he's going to go through this in a few minutes. But again, you don't have to overflow. If you want all your calls and all your reports showing everything that happened, fine. You don't have to put the number of overflow by calls or overflow by time. If you make that 0, then it doesn't even use that, okay? And then you can transfer to a number. That could be an offsite answering service. It could be a voicemail only user, another queue even. You can hang up, which I don't recommend, or you can go to your off hours treatments. And then when no agents are available, I highly recommend, especially if you have supervisors and wall boards, to choose keep waiting. Because if you do that, then the supervisors will see, oh my gosh, we don't have any calls, any agents logged in, kind of thing. Susie Q, go log in. But if you transfer that to your offsite answering service, or you transfer that to the operator, or you transfer that to someone else, they're going to be getting pounded with calls, and they need to know what's going on. What they'll more than likely do is push it back in, and it just happens again. So, and you don't want to tell people that you're closed during business hours. So, you got to think through what you want to do there. And there's lots of different options at the bottom as you configure this. But whenever you do overflow, in your reports, you're going to see a field called overflowed. And so you'll be able to see how many went through this overflow process. All right, now I'm going to hand it, or actually a couple of other best practices here. As before we go through creating this, it's always a good idea to have your call flow diagrams, because you've mapped it out, because you paid attention to best practices, and to upload all the music, all the prompts, have them recorded. You've mapped all this out, have them ready. And those have to be in WMA, WAV, or W4A format. The maximum is about 2.5 minutes on that. When you look at the file sizes, the max is 8 megabits. And there's lots of tools out there. I use Golden Wave or Gold Wave to convert things, to record things, to shorten things. It's a free tool. It's easy to use. And if you're going to overflow to something, then go create it now before you create your queues. That way you don't have all this back and forth, that you have everything you need, then you can go create your queues. Things that to think about also is if you have things that are common, there is a function called configuration, which sets up defaults. And if you're doing all the same holidays, all the same business hours, the same music on hold, all of this, you can set that up under configuration. It'll automatically populate it, and then you can make changes as needed. There's a couple other things to think about too, about line presentation mode options, that you can set it where the agent, when they get a call, that it will show the incoming caller ID and also the queue. It's something that you want to show on the display so that they know this is a sales versus a customer service versus a technical support. And there's some other parameters like camp on timers and park timers and the after call work type of thing. All right, so now I'm going to hand it over. We've got these detailed in this slide, but I'm going to hand it over and let Lee go ahead and share his screen and show you the admin configuration of both queues and auto attendant.
Thank you, Sarah. So what I'll do before I run into the sort of service configuration, let's just recap again on the prereqs on the KBS portal side. So the steps you need to take, assuming we've already completed the actual background work to set up the workspace, is we have to have the licenses available in our catalog, and then we will basically, so I'm just showing a few of them here. So we have the licenses, we place an order, we have the licenses in inventory. Then if we go to subscribers, so let me just look at this particular subscriber. So once we add a KCC related license to a subscriber, the system will automatically go and grant that particular subscriber permissions within inside the queuing environment. So what that means is, as an administrator, when you go to set up and engineer, configure the queues or service, you will basically be able to select these particular persons as either an agent or a supervisor based on what license has been granted to them. So another point in terms of setup is we have to have a set of numbers to route into the queuing application. So once licenses are ordered inside the portal, an additional menu options opens up, and this is the contact center under phone numbers. Now, what will appear here are any system numbers which are not currently allocated. So they're not allocated to any particular services or Meet Me, etc. So you will have these particular numbers, part of your estate, which you have flagged as system numbers. And when these numbers are ticked here, the system will then know that anytime a call is received for these numbers, the first place they should go is they should go over to the queuing application via a virtual trunk, and the queuing application will then process that particular call. So assuming we have those items now set up, one further thing is I said that when the sort of mini onboarding to set up your environment is completed, your portal will be updated to give you the URLs that you use for the service. So there is the admin portal, supervisor, assuming you're licensed for that, and the WebRTC soft client. So the admin is our first step in terms of building the service. So I'm just going to log into it here. I'll log out, log back in. So I have the URL. I enter, it's web-based. So in terms of setting up a queue, I go to Administrator, Applications. So from here, I have two options. I can manage the queuing application, which is known as Queue Manager, or I can also manage settings for the persons within inside my organization who will have the operator console. So I can manage centrally certain aspects of their configuration. So let's move into Queue Manager and IVR. So we have a number of items now available. And the item which is probably of most interest is services. So services are what we call any means of incoming call handling on this particular system or service. So if I go in here, I have a number created already, but if I then want to add a service, so I just click add service, and I'm now presented with a number of menu options. So the first thing I need to do is identify the particular service. So we'll call this new queue. We give it a telephone number. I'm working off an EMEA system, so we use international E164s because we're covering multiple countries with different dialing plans. We specify the time zone, and then we can specify our schedule. So the schedule is basically how we want to set our in hours and out of hours time. So what we can do is we can either set it to automatic, and we then configure a set of time or times at which the service or the queue is considered in service, and any time which doesn't meet that is then considered out of service. So another thing we can set, we probably set beforehand, is holidays. So we can configure, I think it's up to 14 holiday periods in a year. And the way the system works is that when a call arrives in, it looks first of all to see, are we in a holiday period? If yes, it goes to the particular holiday treatment. And if not, then it basically checks the schedule to see if the queue is open or the queue is closed. And just as a reminder again, so we can set it to automatic, so it uses this, it uses the particular settings we have here, or we can also set it to manual. So if you want to manually toggle on and off the particular queue, it can be done from here. That might be handy if for whatever certain reason there's an emergency and you, for example, need to shut the queue off and basically route calls elsewhere and send them to basically the out of service treatment because of some type of event or emergency in the office. So assuming now that we have set up our schedule, we then define the in-service treatment. Now the options available we're listing here. So the two as basically top level choices that are of primary interest are the Queue Manager Advanced, that is the queuing application, and the IVR. So let's run through those. So I'll select Queue Manager Advanced here. Sarah has shown this already, so I'll just give you a reminder of what the various settings are. So we've selected Queue Manager Advanced, and what we can now configure is we can configure our overflow conditions. So what we're going to say here is, if I have more than this number of calls waiting in a queue, I consider that queue to be in an overflow condition. Or if I have any calls in the queue which are longer than this, that one's quite small actually. If I have any calls which have been waiting in the queue for longer than this, I'm going to consider the queue to be in overflow. So if any new calls comes in, if any new calls come in, how am I going to handle them? And then I specify the queue overflow action. So we can specify transfer. So if we want to transfer to a different destination, or we can also go to the out of service treatment. So quite a common choice in this stage is you would actually specify the telephone number of a different service. So let's say that's the catch-all service, and you might say, well, if I'm in overflow, I'm going to put it into a different service where I know I may have more agents staffed, or I may have more agents, or I may have longer wait times, etc. So I can actually pick the calls up and ensure they're answered there. There's also an option to state what should happen if a call comes into the queue and no agents are available. So in that case, again, your choices here. The most common ones are keep waiting. So allow the calls to queue. If you do have a supervisor, the supervisor will be able to see immediately that, for example, the traffic light system will go red, and the supervisor will be able to see that that particular service has a bit of trouble. They can then force agents on or contact agents to tell them to log on to the actual queue. And the other one is you can go to out of service treatment, or as with, for example, the overflow conditions, you could also specify transfer, and you could move that particular call onto a different service. Give position, Sarah mentioned before. So if that's ticked, then that will basically ensure that you have a readout of the actual the place that the actual caller.
Lee, are you still there?
Hi, folks. Sorry, it looks like our webinar platform just had a crash for a moment. Looks like everyone's still here. I think Lee left. He's going to come back shortly. Sorry, folks, for the delay. We'll just have to get audio back. We just going to wait a minute for Lee. And again, thanks everyone for sticking around. And we'll get back into this demo. So Sarah, maybe you can take the screen control back.
Yeah, I can pick back up. Yep. Yeah, so he was in this particular screen as we were talking about setting up. Can you see my screen okay, John?
Yep.
Okay, so as you're setting up in the Queue Manager Advanced, the max number of waiting calls, max time, and here's how you would say what you want to do on Queue Overflow if you select those. And if no available agents, you could set keep waiting. There's several options there. And here are the two settings for the timers of how often you're going to play those prompts. If you want to give position in queue, then that is a checkbox here, but you should make sure that you have recorded those short wait and long wait with that trailing and your position in queue is. I would also, best practices, name my file that so that you see it. And then this is the one that we talked about whenever, if you were to, how long you're going to let it ring on each agent's phone or console in order to get the call to them. And if they don't answer it within this time frame, and 18 seconds is, I think, the default, then it will pull it back up and give it to another agent. So this is that timer that if they do have voicemail, you want to make sure that you don't get into those race conditions, as Lee mentioned. So you want this to be shorter than the forward no answer to, say, voicemail if you do give them that. Here's where you choose the call distribution type, one of the 5 that we covered. Breakout option will give you the ability to put a DTMF code in here, like what would you then prompt them, and I use the long wait message to tell them what to prompt. And when I do, I always choose the transfer to a voicemail only user. And then you can also set up that by default you allow the agents, if they have to walk away from their computer using the console, that they can put themselves in not ready. Here is within the queue provisioning that you can set up the different music on hold per queue. You can set it as a default that would be for all queues in the configuration, but you can set it up here on each individual queue and have a different music on hold if needed. Now this would be played intermixing with the announcement. So if I hear the welcome announcement first, then until that first prompt is played, you would hear this music on hold. If you do not populate this, the system does have some standard music on hold for you. And then we also have the short wait, long wait, the overflow message if you want to provide a message before being overflowed. Sometimes you may not want to do that. And if all agents are logged out, I usually don't like to give a closed message during business hours, but you have the option of doing that. This would be a message before or as they press 9 and are being transferred out to that, you could play a message here. And then the last one is a message that you can play to the agents as they're receiving an incoming call from this. And I don't know if we've gotten Lee back yet, but just let me know, Lee, when you join back in or when he does.
Yeah, he's not back yet. He might have lost his entire internet, so we may have to go without him. So
okay, we'll
just keep going, Sarah.
So in the out of service section of creating the queue, we also have you can use the default treatment, but that's because you've set it within the configuration and instead of going to services, configuration has all of that. You can play an announcement, you can transfer a caller, you can go to another queue if you choose go to service. And you'd want to obviously select, that's why you want to have those numbers and you want to have that media uploaded before you get into creation. And then the last portion of creating a queue or a service are your holidays. So if you've set them up as default, they'll appear here, and here you see it's yellow. It's prompting you to take a look at this. You may observe the same holiday, but you may have a different treatment that you provide them, like a different announcement. And a good example of that is some people work or they're closed on Thursday for U.S. Thanksgiving, but then on Friday they want to work or they're going to be open. Some queues may not be open that next day. Similarly with other holidays like Christmas, I'm sure there's other holidays around the world, the same thing. So you'll want to click this here, and you can edit it specifically and put in what you want. And of course, you could delete it if you're going to work on New Year's Day. You could take it off. And when you go in and set up these different holidays, provide a descriptive name so you know what it is. If it's something that happens on that day every year, click annually. And then if it's you're going to play an announcement, then you'd select that. If you're going to transfer to an offsite answering services, kind of thing, you can do that. Or possibly go to another queue. That queue might be a 24/7 or something like that. When you're done, you click Save, and then it will save your changes. The other thing that Kandy Call Center has is the auto attendant. And yes, KBS has an auto attendant, but Kandy Call Center does as well. And when you set this up, one of the things to think about is I think holiday routing is done where you can really be granular and say, I want this announcement for this holiday, I want this announcement for this holiday, and I want this announcement for this holiday. That's different than KBS auto attendant, where it's just a holiday gets the same announcement or the same choices. But you can set it up here. If you go in and set the treatment instead of Queue Manager Advanced, you set the treatment to be IVR, then that will give you the ability to create an auto attendant or an IVR. If you select a welcome message, people cannot punch through and enter menu choices until this is done. So if you want them to hear this entire message before going on, you'll set one there. If you don't, then don't select one. And the very first thing you'd see is Manage Menu and Options. You would click that, and then it gives you the ability to name the menu, and you can choose your main auto attendant greeting and put it here. You can also choose, most people choose a single DTMF digit, which means you have from 0 to 9 as entries, and you can add each one individually, add an option, and you can put it in. On no selection, you can do something here too. So if they haven't made a menu selection, you can repeat the services if wanted. You can keep waiting, you can repeat the menu, transfer to somewhere, play a message, and you can even do submenus. So that's pretty handy to have as well. If everything this particular customer is using auto attendant, needs that holiday granularity, and needs it all reporting around that, then the KCC auto attendant would be a great choice. Okay. So let's talk about some of these things that we've covered briefly here. The routing calls to different things and using the transfer option, transfer during overflow. In the in-service treatments, there's 3 ways to use the transfer. One is if no agents are available. We talked about keeping that as keep waiting. The breakout option could be a transfer for you. If they press, let's say, 9 as my example, then they could be transferred to a voicemail-only user. The overflow treatments of max calls or max time, either one, then you could overflow them to another location or another queue. And then for out-of-service treatment, off hours, closed hours, that type of thing, and for holidays. So I mentioned the voicemail. You can go in and create a voicemail only user in KBS. And if you do not have this created as a product or you don't have it in your catalog, then please open a case and we can add that in there for you. But this is a voicemail only user. I recommend that you're not going to be calling this from the outside world. So don't make this a direct telephone number or a DID. Don't even give it an alias or an extension. This is only going to be used whenever you're using it to transfer out of one of these queues and escalate. I would highly recommend turning on voicemail transcription and attaching the courtesy message of the voicemail to this email that is generated, and then setting up voicemail to email and using a distribution list of multiple people for this queue to answer or get these notifications of new messages. Because if one person leaves the company, you want to make sure that that's still handled. You can also set up an advanced hunt group, and advanced hunt groups do allow you to go in and set up time of day controls and also come with a mailbox in there, and so you can set that up as well. So in the transfer to, instead of a voicemail number, it would be a hunt group number. After hours, if you have people that rotate the on-call schedule, one of our partners is doing this now, and we've done it for a few of our other partners. But you can set up a user that has Find Me, Follow Me, and that's everybody from the second package and above, not the very low-end Voice Essentials, Voice Basic, but Voice Premium and above user. And they have the ability to set up in their end-user web portal, and this would be like a dummy user, to set up Find Me, Follow Me, SIM ring, sequential ring, any of that. And you can give that the login credentials of that dummy user, let's say, for the end user web portal and to the manager that handles that on-call personnel, and they can manage the on-call schedule themselves. So you can have all this in there, they can set it up. I used to do this for a living too when I was emergency technical assistance, and we would hand over basically a Motorola flip phone to everybody who was on call. So now it can be changed dynamically through the cloud in the end user portal. Many of our partners utilize offsite answering services. Healthcare is a really big user of this, and so you may think about providing an announcement to callers before they get routed. So you can definitely do that and say that your call is being transferred to our after hours answering service, or even for the previous one, your call is being transferred to our off hours or after hours support line or something like that. That way they know, what's going on, and all of a sudden now they're getting ringback when they've been waiting for 5 minutes. So at least it reduces the amount of abandons there. A couple other things as you are adding, so the queue is built, the service is built. You must have agents in those SKUs to be able to answer calls, and those SKUs have to be applied through KBS Admin, and Lee was so gracious to go through that with us. And your agents can be phone-only agents where they use an IP telephone. They can be console agents where they use the soft client, or they can be a console receptionist where they're not in any queue, but they're actually using the client itself. So, and of course, then there's supervisors as well. Each of those, including wall boards, TV monitors that you may have up, those are all SKUs are assigned to those users. And when those are assigned, then now you can go into the agent configuration on the left-hand margin, and there are two little icons here. One has a plus or a magnifying glass, and one has a plus sign. So the magnifying glass will allow you to see more detail, so you'll see who is actually assigned to this from an agent and a supervisor capability. And on the right-hand side, you can also click plus, and that will open up this window here, and you'll see only those agents that are not currently, or supervisors that are not currently assigned to this queue. So that may be a little confusing to people. You've got multiple pages here. You can search for people, and you click on if they're going to be a supervisor or an agent. If they're going to be an agent that's assigned a skill set, queue routing by skill set, then you'll want to set their skill level here. This is the only place that you can do that, and you hit save. Okay. Now, your agents in their agent configuration can be provisioned there, but your supervisors can also. You see the checkbox here? If you go under supervisor configuration, that's you can only configure supervisors there. All right, let's talk about logging in via the phone with a headset more than likely, and we set a button there for them to log in and out. But when you're using the console here as an agent, you'll see that I have these 4 tiles here on the right-hand side: sales, general inquiries, billing, and technical support, that when I click on any of those, it will log me in or out of them as needed. So there's more granularity. You can do a lot more things in the soft client, and the fact that you also have the ability to work from any location, because all you have is a browser. The states the agents are in, either logged out or logged in. Available means you're logged in and you are ready to take a call. And not ready is only applicable here whenever you select, there's an icon up here when you enable that, and you can then go not ready. You're still logged in, but you need to either take a break just a second, maybe handle a couple of calls, and then as you see calls waiting, this is something also great about the console. You see how many calls are waiting, and then you can log back in and take calls as needed. All right, let's look at the pros and cons here from phone only versus console. The working from home location or wherever you're working from, with the pros with the phone itself, all you do is push one button to log in and one button to log out. It's the same button, it's a toggle, and it will tell you you've been logged into all queues or you've been logged out of all queues. So that is super, super easy. But the problem is that they can't really work from anywhere. They would either have to take the phone with them, which can be, troublesome to get it working, here or there. It should work, but, with their data network, who knows? But the pros of using the console means they can work in the office today and at home tomorrow, and in 2 weeks from now, they can work at another location and still have the same exact capabilities through their computer. But they do need to have a broadband internet connection. The cost per agent, it's a less expensive seat to be a phone-only agent. And the add-on itself, the seat would be a voice premium, voice plus, and higher. But then the add-on for phone only is less costly than using this. And of course, then you need a headset to really be productive. And then reusing the computer that someone has is a good resource here, but then the browser costs nothing. Chrome is what we highly recommend here and require, but you do need a headset just because you're going to be dealing with customers, background noise, and all of that. And it does have a more expensive KBS seat because it needs to have the WebRTC and presence capability that we talked about previously. You can be in multiple queues across all of these, but you can't do things like go on not ready. And if you need to go on a break or see how long calls are waiting in queue, you're going to have to look up at a wallboard in the corner versus on your computer. And the benefit of the soft client here is that you can see all of that, and you can even come out of the average or after call work if needed. All right, a couple of things here within the setup of the console itself. Instead of choosing Queue Manager Advanced, choose Operator Console. And the appearance here, there's some settings here that we'll talk through, but one in particular is this Calls in Queue options. By default, it will show calls in queue on your agent console, on the soft client. And they're going to think that those calls are for them, but that's just calls coming into the queue. And so you'll want to turn that off, so don't show calls in queue. And the other one is their same thing is at the agent level. Whenever they look at settings, calls in queue options, they can turn that off as well. But if you put it here, it goes across all of them. Another thing that I would highly recommend is that you, and we don't do this by default, our quick reference guide refers to these colors as types of calls. And so you'll want to set this up as well. So this, again, Operator Console under Appearance, and you can click on any of these. It'll open up a window, drag it down, choose a color scheme by kind of dragging a box color there, and then clicking back into the white space window. So I've chosen yellow for incoming calls, orange for outgoing, green for active calls, and blue for held. So that tells the agent, while they're using the soft client, differentiating the different types of calls. There's another thing here too under, I believe it's advanced features, that is, we ask that you turn this off to do not enable bridging on consult calls. That causes problems, so you don't ever want to have that enabled. All right, let's talk about logging into the phone. I've got it set up here as well, whether it's a Polycom, a Yealink, a whatever type of phone. It's really valuable to have this as a speed dial for your agents to log in. And I've called it either Q or Q login dash out. That's not where you're going to get the calls, but that's a speed dial that we've set up in device keys or device parameters, either one. Both of them support it. And when they press it, it automatically puts in a dialed number that's assigned to the queue, not the pilot number for the queue, but if you're looking in the agent configuration window, it does show it there. I'm going to show it in just a minute to you. But every single queue has a default password of 1111#. And so we don't want that to be common knowledge. So you'll want to put that for security reasons in there. If you want to change that, absolutely, it does require a case and we can change that. And do remember though that the calls for the queue will come in on your primary line. And so a couple other things here is that the user, if you know they're going to use the phone, even if they're going to use both phone and console, not at the same time, but have both enabled, then you need to build that KBS user. The subscriber must have their username, which is the user part before the @ domain, to be all numbers, absolutely no letters, and it needs to be a subset of their telephone number in order to successfully log in. And because some domains are longer than others, we highly recommend this to be 4 or 5 digit number at your domain. Because if there's a very long domain, SIP headers may not work as designed. So if I'm in the device GUI key parameters, you can go and click this, make it a speed dial, label it whatever you want, and then put in this particular number. I'm going to show you where to get that. When you do that, if you save this, it's going to put in an invite and some other things in here. But add a little bit of a pause, and then the 1111# is the default password unless you have that changed. And so that's here. I've also shown it in device parameters. Super easy to do. Polycom adds pauses by doing a $C, the word pause, and the number of seconds you want to pause, and a $. It also, they have another one that is a $CWC. That's where you wait for calls to be connected before pulsing the digits and stuff like that. Okay, so the reason why you pause is you wait just a little bit for things to get connected. And here's where under agent configuration, under applications, Queue Manager IVR, under agent configuration, you see the phone number here. It's a long digit number. That's what is actually dialed to log into the queue, not the queue number itself, but this number, and then 1111#. And so this shows a Polycom, the parameters for that, bigger in that waiting to be connected, and the pause. And we'll highly recommend that you also do these in phone templates so that you don't have to redo this each and every time. Just makes it much simpler for you. The same thing if you're doing it on a Yealink phone or Yalink phone. Here's one in particular. I did the same thing, but the Yealink parameters are the $CP, the number of seconds that you're going to pause, and a $. They also do the CWC. It's consistent between the two types of vendors here, and you can see that in both ways. And again, here it is. If I go in and look at the rules or the profile, you'll see this once you provision it. And I used a line key, but if you don't have line keys, you might have a soft key that you want to apply this to. You can do that too. Okay. So let's talk briefly about our CRM application. I don't know if Lee has joined us yet. Are you back, Lee?
Sarah, I'm back. Many apologies. I had a power cut at home, so I think
lovely.
I think I was talking to myself for a few minutes. Apologies everyone for that. So yeah, no problem. I don't mind, Sarah. If you like, I can just introduce this and describe the concepts around it, and then I'll let you demo it.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So the service itself, folks, it doesn't have any backend CRM integration capabilities, but because we do have basically a web-based soft client, it does offer an integration point into most, if not all, CRMs. And the way it does that is through what are known as URL addressable elements. So effectively, what it's doing is you basically build a string. The string will include a number of variables. And then as a call comes in and you either detect the call or you answer the call, those variables are dynamically written into the string and a web page is launched. So it relies on the fact that your CRM is web-based, and in the browser in which you are running the operator console, you do actually have, for example, if it was Salesforce, you do have a Salesforce window open. So what that means is when, let's say, the call comes into KCC, as Sarah is showing here on the screen, there's a lot of fields that you can use to populate those variables. By far and away, the most popular is basically the calling number. So the calling number comes in, and then what you want to do is you want to pass a query across to the CRM to get it to basically pop up a set of information for you.
So yeah,
so
let me
as I
show
say,
that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I have my agent console here, and I'm going to call in from my cell phone number. And what we've done here is in the contacts here, you'll find it is going to look at this first. So you want information populated in the contacts. And whenever I put in this number here, you're going to see that, well, you're going to see Sarah here, that I've got it set up as internal ribbon communications. That is the company that we're putting into this string. And it's looking up my mobile telephone number. So what I've actually done here in the agent console is in settings, I've got it set this particular string. So this is the ribbon Salesforce, and I have the field here. Let me go a little bit to the right. You can see it. Underscore UI means this is something specific to Salesforce itself, /search/UI. And then the unified search results, question mark, string, equal. And then these are fields. So I'm going to look up caller ID, calling line ID, and that is my cell phone number, and which is the %20 company. And it's going to look up company based upon what I have within the contacts here. And again, the company is this. Now, within the applications, operator console, under advanced features, this is where it's listed. The call pop-up URL, you get the ability, and again, we'll share this with you, but this particular is Salesforce, and I have the choice of saying, send it to me, pop this on an incoming call answer or an incoming call, and then the help will give you all of these. This is what comes in for every single call. We know the agent that is answering it. We know the caller number the caller name, and the called number, which is the queue. All right, and then these are all database related tags. So these are the ones, like I said, company, I've got in my example here, has to be populated and the lookup is in your contacts. Okay, so as I do that, I've got a call I'm going to make in here. And it's calling. I'm going to go to the queue.
Welcome to Kandy Call Center. Please select from the following options. If you do not make a selection, we will transfer you to a general operator. For sales, press 1.
We're going to sales.
Welcome to the sales department. An agent will be with you shortly.
Okay, so you see that come through. All right, and when I answer here, you'll notice it's going to load in another page here, and it's, let me take that off so we don't get feedback. So it did a search on internal ribbon communications, and it also did a search on my particular number. So it's looking at all the Salesforce instance for all of that, anything that has to do with me, anything. So it'll look up contacts, it'll look up documents, it'll look up cases, orders, anything like that that might have that in there. Okay, that's how it works, and it opens up a separate tab within your current consoles. It doesn't work for the phone-only agents. It only works for the console here. Okay, so let's go back here and keep going. And I appreciate everybody for staying on. I know we are.
And Sarah, just a good point to make here is that, yep. So as I say, you showed the example there for Salesforce. So one of the important things is you need to be logged in because your browser has a token. So you can just pass the string through straight away and you're not going to get challenged to say you have to log into Salesforce. And the other thing to remember is that the syntax used for these searches, there's no standard for it. So it will vary. It will vary from CRM to CRM. So if you want to get this working for a particular customer, the best thing to do is to explain that, you know, you basically ask the admin of that particular service, how do I construct URL addressable elements for a search string? They will provide the details back, and then you construct that, and you just add it into the actual the operator, sorry, the console UI that you just showed.
Thank you, Lee. And that's a very good synopsis of it, is that it does vary, but it also has the most flexibility to work with any CRM that you may have. All of the CRMs out there are browser-based, and so it's basically going to make a screen pop in a separate tab for them, and then use those search strings. Again, these are always included for the call, but if these need to be there, it's going to have to match under contacts to look that up. Okay? Great. A couple of things that we've noticed as people have deployed this is whenever you are logging into the agent console soft client as a receptionist or as an agent using the soft client, either one, that you don't have to put in the @ domain. You just put in the stuff that comes in before the @ sign in your user ID. And the password to this is actually your KBS, your end user portal, and what you might log into any client, it's that password. And the one that has AAC, that is the attendant console, the AC part. This, again, I showed you just a minute ago is a sample screen of that. You'll see that I've got highlighted here for green, lots of different things that you can do, park and transfer, all kinds of stuff. And there's a lot of functionality here. As a supervisor, you have the same thing. You log in, and it is the QMS in the acronym in your specific domain. And you'll use just everything before the @ sign to log in, and your KBS end user web portal login password kind of thing. All right. And then here's what the supervisor console looks like. I have a few things here as well on this, that you have several different look and feel the dashboards. The general dashboard gives you lots of things from peg counts to diagrams to seeing what's going on. If you're actually using a wallboard up in the corner somewhere, I highly recommend this queue dashboard, especially if you've got several different queues. You can see how many calls are waiting who are queued up waiting for people to answer, how many abandons, how many agents you have active and available, and other statistics. But this gives you probably the greatest real estate for seeing multiple queues. And then you can also, as a supervisor, go in and you can sort on these. So here is a call that's waiting. You can also look at calls that are active, meaning currently talking to agents, and you can sort by agent and by queue. It's also a great one that you could put up. And then the supervisor, the agent details. If you're really managing agents, you can log agents in and out here. You can also look at their skill level. You can see if they're logged in on the client or not, their BLF status, is their Busy Lamp Field status here. And you can also come over here, and this is where you log them in and out. The checkbox means they're logged in, and you can uncheck them to log them out of something. And there are other options here in the queue details. You can also log them in and out as a manager, supervisor here for your agents. But here you can set certain things as supervisor, which are super neat. You can manually close the queue. You can also change what the out of service treatment means, where your calls are going to. You can also upload audio files like music on hold files and edit holidays, just like we do in admin, but you've given that to the supervisor to do. So I'm going to now hand it over, and we're going to talk about reports. We have a couple more things, if you guys will bear with us, and then we'll get to some of the support things.
Sarah, certainly, if you give me control, it'll probably be a little bit quicker if I just show these directly from the portal. Yeah. So if you can give that to me.
You got it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the service itself, it offers a sort of pretty powerful set of adaptable reports that can be either scheduled or run immediately to basically query aspects of your business. So reports are typically run by the administrator. They can also be run by the supervisor, but it's typically run by administrator. To access these, you again log into the admin portal. You go to administrator, queue manager, and IVR, and then you select reports. So to create a report, I'll just select the button there. We configure firstly, so I'll run through the various options here. So we basically give the report a name, and then we select the type. So the types available are details, aggregate charts, and login, logout. So details are effectively, it's basically a CDR type list of all your calls. So if you want a very detailed view of all the calls that have come into your queue or queues, that's the option to select. You could then take it off board and you could process it yourself. You can also run the aggregate reports, and what they allow you to do is they allow you to group information together in a logical manner. So it is more presentable, and you have a better snapshot of the activity within your queues. So if we do select aggregate, there's a number of sort of settings we can put in that. So we can say, well, aggregated according to the operators who are answering the calls, and show me what they are doing, or give me a summary of what they're doing every hour. So for every report, I'll go back to the main one again. So for every report, we also have an option to filter out the data. So we can say, well, gather me all the data. However, I only want to see items pertaining to a given service. So I only want to see, for example, calls that came into the front desk. Perhaps I've had a problem with that, or I need to analyze activity on that, see if it needs more staffing. So you can razor in on that particular service. You can also run reports on specific agents. So if you want to monitor what someone's been doing, if they're overloaded with calls, etc., the call wait time is too long, you can select the agent. And you can also run basically a report for call types. So again, you might want to find, well, look, how many calls are being abandoned? I want a quick view of how many calls are being abandoned, or is there a particular time in the day that they are being abandoned? And so for all reports, what you can do is you can either run the report straight away. You specify the time span over which you want to run the report. You can run it straight away. This one doesn't have a customer logo built into it. So let me just hide that a second. So in here, we get a summary of the report. Then on the next page, we will basically have the report details. And what we can do then is we then have various options for taking this data and exporting it to our own desktop. So we could actually download it as a PDF, or if it's a set of information that you want to crunch the details in it yourself, you would download it as a CSV. So let me just move back into the admin menu. So as well as running a report now, you can also set a schedule. So again, let's pick any old schedule here. I'll call it, let's call this daily report. So again, I set the parameters which determine what's in my queue and, for example, what's in my report and what I want to filter by. And then basically I set a schedule. So I give it a name, I give it a description. How often do I want it to run? So a very common report is a sort of morning manager type report. So we'd run it every day. We'd run it for whenever the manager gets into the office. So we'd run it before the manager gets into the office. Recovery attempts is if we fail to send out the actual the notification, the details itself, we'll try a few additional times. We specify the format that we will send the report out in. So the two choices here, if we're going to send this out via email, is PDF or CSV. So PDF if you just want a snapshot view, CSV if you want to take the data and do additional analysis on it. So in terms of, there's one account we will send it, so it's a notification account on the service. And then what we can do is we can specify here, we can specify one or many email addresses that will receive the report. So again, we'll add it here. And then so every day at 6 a.m., we will basically gather this particular report. Isn't very sort of, there's not a lot of filters on it. So basically every day I'm going to get a report sent at 6 a.m. to these particular email addresses with complete details of the activity from the previous 24 hours. Okay, so we'll just save that one. Go back to reports. And any saved reports you'll have are in here. And again, you just have the easy option from here to go and modify those. So if you wanted to change who's going to receive them or the time they are sent out in, or if you do want to delete them because the reports aren't required anymore, or you want to actually change the filters, all of that can be done on the reports that you have defined. Sarah, that's it.
Great. Okay, we're going to continue. We just have a couple more slides here, guys and gals. So some best practices in this. If you are making changes to Kandy Call Center, to a call center in general, then you want to clearly define what those are going to be and get buy-in from the customer, the end business. Define and document the order of operations for that, because being smart about your time, and instead of having to go back and forth, if you have everything that you need to do the changes, like having the recordings and all that kind of stuff beforehand, it just makes that much easier and you don't forget something. Schedule a maintenance window. Do not do this during business hours because you are impacting your customer calls. And so you want to do it after that. As I mentioned, have your recordings done beforehand. Test the recordings. Make sure the quality is very good to be used. If they're not, then have them re-recorded. Put them in the right format. Go create things like dummy users, voicemail-only users, hunt groups, whatever you might need in order to do some overflow routing or after-hours routing in your announcements. But then print it out and follow it to a T, because in these time crunch scenarios of maintenance windows, you want to be checking that off, following that procedure. And then as you make those changes, then give it just a few minutes, less than 5 minutes or whatever, to have that take effect, because of some downstream things that are being processed. So then make sure that you test these before you say, okay, it's good, I'd made the provisioning, but open up the the after hours, make it longer so that you can actually run some test calls through and trace through to make sure that you did everything. Have several points that you're testing in so that if you go back, you don't have to test everything from the beginning. And then once it's done, make sure you put the business hours back in the right time and then go in and notify management and the customer that these changes were successful, if there's any follow-up items or cases that you may have created. And then document the change was made, because guess what? You're probably changing your reports. They may route differently, or you may have different peg counts and different things. And just having a note of that time is very important. We've also created some things from a customer success side to help you. So things like capturing your queues and the agents and the supervisors and all of that, as well as what SKU you want their users to be. In addition, capturing the media that you're going to use, the prompts, the scripts, very important to have those approved as well. And you're more than likely going to tweak them a little bit, so don't have them recorded professionally until you've run through and you've gotten everything provisioned and you run through it. Whenever you make changes, update your scripts so that if you do want to get those recorded professionally, then you can do that and save money from having to repeat them over and over, because you do have to pay. We do have a PowerPoint that'll help you document call flows, after hours scenarios, holidays, agents by queue, skill sets, and supervisors by queue. We also have a quick reference guide for your agents that are using the console. And we also have some how to sell call center training. So if you're interested in that, you want your sales teams trained on what to look for, how to develop leads, how to follow up on those, and what are the features and functionality to that, then happy to engage you with that. We have some other things that are coming soon, some video tutorials, some how-tos, how to use the soft client, how to log in and use the Kandy Call Center with a SIP phone, and then a video tutorial also for supervisors. Again, we do have a lot of content and collateral for you to use that can be branded with your logo and your name. You don't have to call it Kandy Call Center. Call it whatever you want. And again, they're user guides, admin guides, data sheets, quick reference guides, sales presentations, and video tutorials. And now I'm going to hand it over, and again, thank you everybody for staying on with us. I'm going to hand it over to Casey Crosby, part of our support team, to answer a few questions and talk about a few support tips. Casey?
Thanks, Sarah. All right. So yes, just some support tips that we want to highlight to cover that we typically give out as part of training sessions that we do with customers. One of the main tips that we use is to make sure you're using the Chrome browser. It's the only supported browser for KCC. Make sure that you're using the latest version. They often do a Google browser update every couple weeks, I would say. So one tip is to make sure that is updated. You can clear the browser cache using Control F5. This isn't going to fix all of your issues, but is a general help if there is something that is stuck or something of that nature. Log out. Sometimes if you make any configuration changes, like say you're going to add a new service queue and then you want to start adding agents and stuff, if there's any like weird behavior, just log out, clear the browser cache with Control F5, give it a couple minutes. These changes aren't instantaneous. It does take a little bit for the configuration to reload. So give it a minute or two. Likely what you will see will be the changes will happen, but they will not happen instantaneous. So we do not recommend typically to use the attendant console alongside the Smart Office desktop client or mobile, for that matter. If you're using the attendant console, please make sure you're only using the attendant console. If you're using the desk phone, use a desk phone. You can have both up together, but don't use them. Don't try to send calls from one to the other. But use with the Smart Office desktop or mobile client is not supported. It does cause issues, and we've had to do some troubleshooting and support tickets to fix that. And one thing that we get ever so often, if you think that there is an issue with the attendant console or something like that, the console logs will be a good a good support ticket item to include. You can get these by doing Control-Shift-J to launch the developer tools within the Chrome browser. And then you'll want to make sure that you enable the verbose logging. Once you do that, it will change from the default level to all logs. And then you'll just need to have that running in the background. That'll capture logs and then reproduce the issue with the agent that is having the problem. And then right-click Save As, and then make sure you attach those into the KBS support ticket that you put when you open that. As always, you'll need to include call details and stuff of that nature. Some other things to do. You can go to the next one, Sarah, if you want. On the last one, we're going to talk about the KCC kind of upgrade schedule. I'll go briefly over this. We're working to get upgrades done twice a year. We're looking at once in the summer and once in the winter. So it's a little bit different from some of our other KBS products, but there's a lot of stuff that is actually coming in this next release, which I believe is version 2.9.2.3 now. And it's going to solve several different issues. We've touched over some of those over the course of this training that we've done here. If you're an admin user, make sure your notifications are enabled. You will get a portal notification at least 7 days prior to the upgrade and some of the details regarding that specific upgrade. We are in the final steps of rolling out the release 2.9.2.3 that should be here before the end of the year for sure. Most likely it's going to be at the end of this month or early in December. But we should be sending out a portal notice within the next week or two, I would believe, just finalizing some things there. Other than that, that's pretty much it from my side. Sarah, is there anything you wanted to wrap up with?
That's it. Unless, were there any specific questions that we wanted to answer, or did you answer them all in line?
I was going through them in line when they came up.
Great.
Most of them did. There were a pretty good set of questions there. If there's anything that Kandy Call Center doesn't do that you currently wish it to do, you can always submit a support case asking for an FDR for whatever specific action you're wanting it to do. And then we can review that with the design team and kind of process that.
All right. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We will be providing the slides to this that have more details. And so and if you did not watch, you came in late, or you have other people that you would recommend watch this, then by all means, we'll be sending out the link to this, and you can then share it with them too. Thank you, everybody. John, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I mean, you did a good job yourself there. I mean, everyone, thanks for staying so late. We just didn't anticipate some of the frankly, some of the timing of the sections, including particularly the, I know, Lee, you lost your power, literally, which was, we've never had on a webinar, so lots of firsts today, but no problem at all. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around, and we look forward to keeping in contact with you. Thanks, and look for an email from us with the webinar replay and the link to the presentation. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.